short form series are their own medium and kind of have their own rules. Now, obviously, everything is online. So is everything a web series? They can smell out a fake. And that is kind of death for an online series. I think all creators that connect with an audience and succeed in the online space have genuine passion about the topic that they're creating around.
Welcome to We Interrupt This Broadcast. We are very lucky today to have Alyce Adams, so we can talk about all things online and digital marketing. Alyce is a fan of all things online, using that passion during her 8 years as investment and development manager at Screen Australia in the online department. She wrote one of the first scripted series for release on TikTok in 2020 called Love Songs, which went on to achieve 20 million views. She also wrote the Audible original rom-com Sounds Like You, which was nominated for Best Audiobook at the 2025 Australian Industry Book Awards. Her most recent work includes writing and producing First Kiss, a vertical indie series that has 1 million views on Instagram. Alyce, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started and what drove your passion for all things online?
I think my starting point was in high school. I watched a lot of YouTube and really enjoyed that. And that somehow has now led to a career. But really, I was at film school and everyone around me was wanting to make short films and work on their feature scripts and things like that. But for me, I was really interested already in web series. I was watching them and seeing them on YouTube and realized that that's kind of the direction I wanted to go. I wanted to make a series that connected in the same way that other series I'd watched online did. And so I made my first web series with my sister, who was a producer. We always wanted to work together. So the idea was like, let's make a series that showcases what we're interested in. And it was called I Can't Even. It was really nerdy. It was about two fangirls who lived in a share house together. And each episode focused on a different fandom. So from that experience, we learned very early on about the power of audience and tapping into a specific audience. And through that, I went to web series events and different festivals and started to learn more about Screen Australia and their funding. And I was able to, in the end, get a job at Screen Australia in the online department because I already had that web series experience. But starting at Screen Australia, first as an admin assistant, and then basically working my way up over the 8 years, I really got a great overview of hundreds of different Australian web series and projects that came through that found audiences and ones that didn't. So I really learned how to go about finding the audience and in many cases knowing even from sometimes a logline whether something was going to connect in that space. And so now since I've finished at Screen Australia, I work freelance. I'm still developing, writing my own projects, and now also helping other teams discover their audiences in the online space.
I think that's amazing. And what a journey. Thinking about that real understanding of what's going to connect with an audience and how you've honed that to even from a log line go, that doesn't quite pass the smell test, or you might need to work this out. And something there that really interests me, because I remember hearing you talk so passionately about some of these very low budget web series that focused on some very niche aspect of classic literature or something that was just really appealing to that particular audience. But that film school experience of you being interested in the new, even at that stage, being so future focused and going, no, this is actually, in the words of Wayne Gretzky, where the puck is going.
Yeah. But I mean, at the time when I was making my first web series, which was 2016, which is over 10 years ago now, even at that point, to me, it felt like YouTube had been around for ages. I'd been watching it since I was in high school and seeing already lots of web series. So I felt like, we got to get on board. It's already happening. But yeah, now to see how much bigger it's grown, and also really how actively it's changing in real time because it is so new. Back then when you were talking about web series, there was a real discussion of when Netflix came onto the scene, it was like, well, is Netflix a web series? Because, you watch it online. And now obviously everything is online. So is everything a web series? But even the term web series is kind of, not falling out of fashion, but is changing. Now people use terms like short form series. With micro dramas are like the new short term for web series. So it's really fun being in that space as you can start to track how people view it differently and how the wording around it changes as well.
Certainly. And it's something that you can't do quickly. It's not like, okay, all right, we need to build an audience for this, or we've made this, we need to find the audience. It's got to be in that development process. Is that something you come across, people wanting to try and quickly get something out there or connect with an audience that they haven't built over a long period of time and aren't sort of respecting the difficulty in the process that actually takes?
Yeah, I think the most common mistake that filmmakers may have when they're thinking of making a web series is a lot of them don't watch web series. And that became kind of a sticking point when I was at Screen Australia. You know, we would do a lot of talks and talk to a lot of different teams. And at the end of kind of every presentation, even though it felt, you know, obvious, but I would say, if you're thinking of making a web series, you should watch one. If you were planning to make a movie or a TV show, you wouldn't just do it with never having seen anything. But there's a lot of filmmakers who jump into trying to make a web series that haven't seen anything in the past. And then I think that carries over into the medium. I think it's a matter of understanding and I guess respecting that web series, short form series are their own medium and kind of have their own rules. So, you know, movie and TV are different. And so is the case for an online series. So you need to watch a bunch of them to figure out kind of how they work, how they are structured, and also to even see whether your idea has been done. Like that happens a lot as well, where people come in and pitch an idea. You know, like I've actually watched 10 of those series, but I guess you haven't gone out and done the research to see if that space has already been covered. I think audiences are really savvy to whether or not the team behind it are legitimate in their interest. They can smell out a fake, and that is kind of death for an online series. If they can tell that you are coming to with ulterior motives, they're going to turn on you. And the passion that they maybe put into the show in terms of the positivity can then get flipped. And yes, the last thing that you want to happen.
That flip is amazing. And I remember with Nick Coyle's series, Sarah's Channel, he put so much work and watched so many vlogs, and it was so authentic to beauty vlogs. And it was that loving parody that was quite distinctly different from something that Funny or Die did called All Access Avery, which was about a vlogger who had found herself kidnapped and in a basement, but was still vlogging from there. I just thought that was such a stark difference to see. You know, this is made by someone who clearly loves the format they're parodying versus someone who thinks it's stupid.
Yeah, I think Sarah's Channel is a great example of a web series. It's designed with the medium in mind. You know, it's shot and acted out as if, you know, if you're familiar with watching beauty vlogs, then Sarah's Channel fits right into that. You know, it's direct to camera, the length, the structure of it, where, you know, if you took that idea and tried to build it out to a bigger form of it, I think some of the magic you would lose. The fact that you're watching it on YouTube where you watch other beauty vloggers is what is the kinetic energy between it and makes it so fun as a concept. And that's why you have to kind of try and get other filmmakers to think about is actually being aware of the platform that it's going out on and developing it to that platform. That in many ways that's going to resonate stronger with an audience.
Yeah, and their habits and where they are. So this actually segues into one of my first kind of official questions. You know, where does audience choice factor into this? You know, are audience choosing what they watch anymore, or is the algorithm choosing for them?
I think this is a really good question because I guess I would counter and say, when have audiences ever really been able to choose what they watch? There's always some sort of filter behind what is available, you know, in terms of what gets commissioned on a broadcaster, you know, how many TV channels are out there, what a distributor might decide to pick up a film and release. So yes, algorithms are helping to filter through the content that people may be seeing, but in many ways, we have way more access to such different variety of content out there that I guess the algorithm in some ways is needed to help sift through the amount of choice that we have. So I think for the most part that platforms like YouTube and other online places are giving us better access or helping to surface stories that I think historically wouldn't have got a buy-in with a broadcaster or streamer, and that those voices are then be able to either build a big audience and take that to a big Hollywood studio, or they're able to just live in their own ecosystem and people who are into that specific niche little interest can come and watch. So I think it's worth thinking about how, I guess, the history of film and TV has been shaped and how now YouTube is kind of like the next step of it. And that I think we do actually have more choice. I think we need to be conscious of how the algorithm works and how it feeds us and shows us what we're watching, but that in general, we actually have more choice. That's my hot take anyway.
Certainly, I think that's wonderful. I was talking the other day about the fact when we used to have 4 TV channels, it was pretty likely that everyone at school the next day saw the same movie that you did. Whereas now you do have so much choice, but it is obviously important to be conscious of what bubble you might be in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really fractured that, it's really hard to get those moments of sitting down and being like, everyone has watched the one thing. Or not even watched, just have heard of what you're talking about. Like most of the time, the conversation is like, oh, I'm loving this show. It's on this platform that I've never heard of and starring people that you've never heard of. And I think what's interesting about that is that the ecosystem at the moment is able to balance with so many different options. But I think possibly also it might start constricting. Is now, have we reached kind of peak saturation, and how is it going to refine down?
Yeah, because there are only so many eyeballs in the world and there's only so much time to watch content. And if everything you get is hyper specific to you, are there going to be enough people to watch that to keep the critical mass of sustaining the production of that show, for example?
Exactly.
How are you seeing AI into that space with like they're talking about the curator economy versus the creator economy, as it were?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's still so new that it's hard to fully know how AI is changing it. But honestly, I don't like AI. I don't really like it being involved in creative content, but I'm very curious to see how it's going to have an effect on the online space. That is kind of where I guess it's going to be embraced first. I mean, already is being embraced. You can see a lot with micro dramas. Those are tech companies that are behind it. Like they've fully leaned into AI. I think there will be a bounce back from that in terms of people craving something real.
Mm.
And I think we're kind of already starting to see that. But honestly, the space is so new. I don't know enough about how it's being implemented in terms of that audience discovery. So it's basically, watch this space.
I think it's interesting what you said before on that, the sort of an audience can smell a fake or smell a rat. And I think that's where that pushback, or at least in my opinion, where that pushback is going to come from, is anything that is too polished for the format that it is, vertical or web. It's like, no, I like the scruffier, made by a real person. Like that's an expression, for example, that I know that my friends use, or it's related to my fandom or what have you, that an algorithm is not necessarily going to pick up on or is going to use it out of context.
Yeah. I think in particular, like the micro drama space has already, especially within China, like I'm making like fully 100% AI series. And I think people are already starting to get sick of it in terms of like, they all look the same because they're all copying each other, that people are going to start craving the imperfections and what feels more real. But we'll see. I think over the next even year, 2 years, it could really change.
It's like that wonderful Brian Eno quote: whenever there's a new format, the first thing that people do with it is try and replicate something from the old format. It's like it's the pops and scratches and the vinyl sounds and all these things that I think he said it was an indication of art so powerful that the medium is struggling to contain it. Has audience behavior, in your opinion, actually changed, or do we just have more data and more ways to actually understand what audience behavior always was?
I think audience behavior has changed. Yes, we have more data, but I think the way that audiences work has been changing. I think it's really interesting to look back at history and how that now kind of connects to today. But in terms of like when, people watch the first film with a train coming at the screen, right? They react from that. And same even when you watch older classic films in terms of the amount of time they would have for the opening credits. Like you would sit through that. And nowadays, on the film side, you kind of get straight into action. The credits might still be there, but it's not this winding film. I think that's the same when it comes for online. Just it is quite more intense. For online, talk a lot about the 3-second rule. They essentially have 3 seconds to try and hook a viewer, which I think when you obviously talk about that, you're like, wow, that is so short. Like, why can't people give something a chance? But then you need to look at your own behaviors, and everyone does it. So even, the producers and stuff are like, I wish they would like watch our little series. Like, well, what do you give a chance when you're scrolling? And a lot of the time, it's less than 3 seconds. And so it's really interesting to try and unpack, okay, what are the markers to a potential viewer that makes them decide to stop or scroll? And I think a lot of the time, it's always audiences, know their taste or in a way, what they are in the mood for to watch. And you can kind of pick that up within 3 seconds. depending on how polished it is or not. If someone's speaking directly to camera, the music choices, like you can actually pick up a lot in 3 seconds. So yeah, if you're a producer working in that space, you really need to think a lot about your opening shot. What is those 3 seconds? It's got to be something good or something interesting to make me stop and watch. So producers need to be aware of that if they're going to have any hope of people actually checking out their show.
That's so interesting to me, the combination of the sound design and what's on screen, everything that gives people that indication, am I in the mood for this? Can I give it the time? Because I'm sure, like me, you've been sent reels and you see like, oh, that's 15 minutes, not now. Like that's getting filed away for a time. I'm going to sit and watch something that long, but right now I need the quick
all the dopamine. Yeah. But yeah, you can tell the genre of thing is really interesting. If you honestly just, look at your own behavior and what makes you stop. It'd be an interesting challenge if you're watching something within 3 seconds, try and think like, this is what I think this video is going to be about, or this is going to be the tone. Watch the whole thing. A lot of time you're on the money. And so that's obviously why we've developed these instincts and for the most part go off our gut feeling, because everyone has watched thousands of videos and hours online. Like that's a lot of training that our brain knows for the signals to pick up on.
Just like our ancestors walking around the Video Easy and looking at the case to get kind of an idea of what the film's going to be about.
Like it's your movie poster.
I thought this was so interesting from hearing Team Falco talk about this, is the idea that creators will optimize for the thumbnail. So if they can't think of a good thumbnail, they'll shelve the idea for the video until they've got the right thumbnail for it that they think that'll hook audiences.
I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, and in, I suppose, online drama, because to me was more for creator content and classic YouTuber content, but is that something that you're seeing in drama? Trying to figure out, okay, what is the actual hook for this episode?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to try and bring that approach to drama or documentary where something, you may be shooting quite a lot ahead of time. And another common mistake that a lot of teams may do is not think about the thumbnail until they're already a week or two away from releasing. But yeah, the YouTube thumbnail is your movie poster. That is what people are going to see first and decide whether or not they're going to watch it. So there's been plenty of great series that people didn't watch because the thumbnail didn't really accurately capture what the series was about or was interesting to the viewer. There's a really great Australian series, Flunk, that's been ongoing for years on YouTube and does really well. But that team, in their schedule, when they're shooting for whatever episode, they actually schedule in time for the thumbnail shoot. So they already know, like they write out that episode and then they identify, this moment or this scene is what's going to be our thumbnail. And they'll make sure instead of just getting a still frame from the footage, they actually shoot it with a proper camera. That gives them more options. But like that's how much they are aware of the importance of a thumbnail, that they make sure that they're not skipping it while they're shooting, that they get it. And so for a lot of scripted teams, like that kind of mindset needs to be there. And I don't think you have to create an episode around a thumbnail, but it's more, I think the two go hand in hand in terms of creating a great episode that is going to be interesting to your audience, will then naturally mean that there surely is a point of time in that episode that would be a great thumbnail. But you don't have to actually pull it from the footage. Like you can stage it. You can maybe make the characters closer or in different positions depending on the genre that you're doing. Because why not? Like, again, if you're doing a movie poster, most of the time it's not a still from the film, right? They actually do a proper shoot and design it all. So YouTube, you're just trying to do that on a way smaller budget, but you need to kind of have the same mindset.
I think that's wonderful though, because that exactly indicates to me the same way you would plan out your on-set stills. You'd go, these are what we need for marketing, because you're thinking that far ahead. But also that's showing me just how much the development dovetails with the marketing. Because if you're thinking of, okay, well, this is the moment for that episode, you're going to put your production resources around making sure you pay off that moment. And this keeps indicating to me just how much people really need to watch the format that they're trying to be a part of and understand themselves as an audience member. Is it a bad idea for creators to be trying to give audiences more of what they think they are already getting or more of what's popular?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you should be making something that you are passionate about first and foremost, because especially in the online space, you need to be feeding that beast constantly. So you need to like what what you're making. But I think that first you come up with an idea that you yourself really like. And then the second question needs to be immediately like, is there an audience for this in the online space? And that can sometimes be where filmmakers fall over. They have an idea that they really love, which is great, but doesn't necessarily mean that there's a huge audience for it online. And so when it comes to what you're putting out there, I think the stuff that really rises to the top is from filmmakers and creators that have a really original voice. I think that's why comedians like Auntie Donna and especially on that comedy side, that the online space really opens up to weird humor, and that's how they're able to build this passionate fan base, because they are being genuine in their style of comedy. And then I think it comes same then kind of with any interesting niche that people are developing in the online space. You find a community that like really loves bugs. That's their thing, right? And you can make something about that. When I was a screener show, I always gave the example when I would talk about niche audiences in terms of like passionate fan bases was trains. People love trains, and it's kind of all ages and genders, And so I always use that example. No one ever came in with the train project, so I'm putting that out there if anyone wants to apply. There's so many ways you could go about that, but that there is a fan base out there for it. You never want to be making something just because you can see that there's an audience there, but you yourself aren't connected, or you're just putting out stuff that is already being covered. It'll fizzle out. You just won't be motivated to do it. And I think some of the most successful online series are from teams that are fans of that genre themselves. And that's how they know, like, this is how we should market it. This is why we should choose this story point over another, because they are fans of that area, and they know, therefore, where they're hanging out and what's going to resonate with them the most. So I think you always have to approach it from a place of authenticity. I guess we were talking about before. Like, once you try and be more cynical about it, audiences are going to realize, or you're going to burn out as well, because it's not actually your passion.
This episode of We Interrupt This Broadcast is sponsored by Getty Images, home to market-leading creative and editorial content from the world's best photographers and videographers. Getty Images is a trusted partner and creative advisor to media and production companies and YouTube native studios, offering over 37 million footage clips, including video from a range of world-renowned broadcast, studio, filmmaker, and archive partners. If you're looking for historical, contemporary, or creative footage, head to gettyimages.com to find out more.
What's the difference between successful marketing and genuine community building, or tapping into an existing community?
In terms of, I guess, like views, like something getting a lot of views, but are you really getting an engaged audience?
Yeah, or even from the development point of view, is like if someone has created something as like, hey, I think this is for the Filipino diaspora, can you market it to them, versus coming up through actually engaging with that community to make the show?
That's a good question. I mean, I think being able to identify clearly your audience definitely helps with marketing it towards them. But again, if no one on the team really understands that community, you might have success at the start, but then you're probably going to lose it, because you're not going to be able to make the references that is going to engage them. Inna is a great example. Inna is a Filipino-Australian web series that recently came out on YouTube. I was involved with the team in terms of the marketing side of it, but they were able to, very quickly connect with their audience because of the genuine love behind the series in regards to talking about Filipino food, but the Filipino culture and the diaspora of it. That's when the audience really showed up and were really connected, writing very long comments and personal things about their own experiences, because they felt that honesty coming through in the content. And so I think what you're looking for when you're building that kind of community is, definitely not just views, but comments. Basically anything that kind of takes longer for an audience to do, because essentially it's that friction. How much are they willing to do, whether it's writing a comment, sending it to someone, and in particular going off platform to watch more. So if you're making a series that's living on YouTube, you may also be promoting it on shorter platforms like TikTok or Reels. Essentially there's a little advertising interstitials. If they see that and they liked it, they might just move past and like, oh, that was an interesting clip. But are they going to be more motivated after seeing it to actually click off the app and open up a new browser, a new app, type in the series title and find it on YouTube and watch, like there's so many steps to get people to do that. So if you can get people to do that, then like, okay, they are highly motivated. They really want to see this. And that's what you want to be trying to build with an audience. Yeah, I think like the moment, views are kind of like the lowest ranking indicator for platforms in terms of the interest because it's so easy to get. In particular on platforms like Reels and TikTok, like the way you operate on that is passive. It's served up to you. You just have to scroll. So that's why they kind of weigh comments is heavier. And in particular, sending it as a DM. At the moment, obviously algorithm preferences change, platforms change things. But right now, like if you send a reel to someone else, Instagram really favors that because it shows like, oh, you're wanting to have a conversation with someone in a private message. I think, for developing that audience connection, it's trying to be in conversation with them. So noting what they like and trying to either deliver more of that or just also like interacting in the comments, letting them know that the time they're spending on your series is appreciated. So I think, it's really interesting trying to build that connection. It's hard. And that's why I think it's really useful to try and tap into a niche audience or to approach your series trying to figure out who exactly our series is for, because then it's going to be a lot easier to actually find them and make sure that they enjoy what you're making.
Wow. This is all mind-bending and fascinating to think about just that relationship between audience and as things are built. Somewhat building the airplane while it's in the air because like Boy and Dragon, for example, they tested it with 3 episodes and then were able to think, okay, well, where was there more attention and what was building off it? And it was kind of ongoing. And I wonder how that relates to something like Inner, which was, I imagine, conceived and shot as the entire 50 minutes that are then put together later. So in terms of being reactive and responsive to what audiences are enjoying, I suppose that wasn't really possible with that show. So how is that approach, I suppose, between something that is going to be a finished piece of drama content versus something that might be ongoing?
Yeah, that's what the hardest thing is for filmmakers and web series creators is that, for the most part, you have gone off and made the whole series and then now coming to release it, you don't have the flexibility to change what you've already shot, right? So that's why I would say also development is so important for online, in particular, thinking about the release. Like they really need to go hand in hand. But for a drama series, like that's why web series are so interesting. There's such a unique, special unicorn in the online space because YouTube isn't designed for scripted series. So you're trying to mold your story around what the platform does. The platform doesn't care that you maybe spent 6 months writing, developing, shooting this series. They are going to put it out against a YouTube video that someone made in a day. And that one might do better because it might connect better with the audience. So that's always the challenge. It's not as easy for you to make changes based off of audience feedback, once you've released. But that's why I think in terms of when you are releasing, I think for the most part, doing a staggered release is kind of the way to go versus dropping it all at once, because you can then try to see like, okay, how are audiences responding to this episode? And how can I change my approach? What kind of tweaks can I make so that maybe it does better? But that's why I think there's been a lot of talk about recently of like clipping in terms of film studios. But, for web series, it's the kind of the same approach for everything. What kind of promotional content can you make to try and help support the main series? I think a lot of more traditional producers or in the past have been like, okay, we're going to make behind the scenes videos that are like interviews with the cast and crew and how the series got shot. I think that stuff generally doesn't perform well because if someone has never heard of your series, why they're going to want to watch how you made it and why they're going to want to watch an interview with a cast member they don't recognize. So you need to think differently because that kind of option isn't really available to you. And I think what can really work well now, in particular with the popularity of short form vertical places, is clipping. So going through your series and finding the key moments and scenes that ideally speak to your audience. And so for Inner, that's something that we did was I, went through the episodes and I was like, okay, to the editor, these scenes. And then we're going to release those on vertical. And we just kind of experimented, honestly, with different text, different kind of clips to see what would connect with our audience. And that's really interesting. as well in terms of how that works. What is the right moment that will connect, and what is the right context that you need to give as quick as possible of the clip so that they can then understand what's happening and watch it. But those kind of methods in terms of money is all organic. It's really just time, like find those clips and promote it. But you don't need to pay money to try and boost it. You can do a lot of marketing for an online series for free. It's a matter of obviously your own time, but you don't need to pay to try and get views, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. So it's like trying to find those moments within there that will make something particularly shareable, or something that's like, oh my God, my mum used to do this. I remember seeing this fantastic page that a former student put me onto, subtle Asian traits.
Yes,
And it was these
big.
things like, my mother would always brush her teeth in the kitchen because she couldn't stand to have her toothbrush near the toilet. And they're like, oh my God, my mum too. And a clip like that is the kind of thing that is going to get forwarded and shared because it makes people feel seen versus something that is like, who's this for?
Yes, yeah. So I think, relatability. Relatability and community is what you're looking for.
And that was actually something that stood out on Sarah's channel as well. And we realized quite early on that female sci-fi fans were really, really underserved, especially if they were interested in makeup and beauty products. There wasn't something that brought those things together. And within their fandom, they're often marginalized or told they weren't enough of a fan because they didn't know this obscure reference from this episode, or, the gatekeeping that comes with it, especially science fiction fandoms. And it was that thing that made people feel like this has been made for me. And I feel seen within it.
I think the key thing with web series, and what I would tell a lot of creators or filmmakers when they were coming in, is that, and this is what I mean about niche, is that you need to be tapping into an underserved audience. You need to ask yourself, why would an audience member choose to watch my Sharehouse web series when there are 10 TV shows already in that setting? Why would they watch your low budget, no name actor, shorter episode version when they can go watch New Girl on Netflix, right? So what are you either doing to the Sharehouse conceit that hasn't been done before, or how can you think of an idea that taps into this underserved audience so that they are going to be motivated to find your content? Like when you talk about niche audiences, like some of the biggest groups of niche is queer audiences because, they're not being served in the traditional spaces, especially like globally. So they are actively looking on YouTube, other places for that kind of representation. So it can either be something that's, important to a person's identity, whether it's their religion, ethnicity, sexuality, kind of background, but it can also be something that is a very specific interest or hobby. Like I think D&D is a really good example of that. Like that's huge online, and that's because that community is really into it and they are searching for content like that. But doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to make a TV show or a movie about it. There was a movie about D&D and it didn't do as well as I hoped, but that's why online really works for it. And that's what I think every filmmaker needs to be thinking about when they're coming up with their idea. Can they identify who that underserved audience is?
Yeah, absolutely. And turn them into recommenders and sharers. Wonderful. Well, I think you're such a unicorn in that you're like a writer creator yourself, as well as you're able to consult other people on what they're doing with such credibility and insight. So this is coming to some questions about your process and your practice a little bit, and also what might help producers. Ideally, at what point would you come on to a project? If you're talking a particularly savvy producer, when should they start talking to you?
Right, yeah. I mean, I've been working with different teams now, and also, at different stages. So, I mean, I think I do like coming in at the development stage because I do think that there are basically a lot of problems that you can solve are in development, and whether that's from a production point of view in terms of having creative constraints is really beneficial for an online series, but also it's looking at the opening of episodes, looking at what's the hook. When you know that you only have 3 seconds to get someone's attention, you really need to be paying attention to that opening scene. And a lot of the time when I was at Screen Australia and giving feedback on rough cuts, a lot of my notes would be cut the establishing shot. That'd be the opening of the episode. I was like, cut it, because you need faces. And so for online, faces is what people connect with. So we've already lost half the audience because we've established where they are. Online audiences will figure out the setting. they're savvy enough to do that. And then it's things about pacing. Like sometimes a lot of my notes are like, actually, for an online series, your pilot first episode needs to act like a pilot for TV. Just because it's 5 minutes or shorter doesn't actually change anything. Still need to have kind of the same beat. So the inciting incident needs to happen in the first episode. And sometimes for people who are approaching web series for the first time, that's not the case. So that's kind of like feedback that I can give. So that's, I guess, the benefit of coming in early. Because yes, sometimes when I've come in at the later stage, it's like, okay, well, that can't be fixed. Okay, so now I'm going to think of different ways to try and market it. But yeah, I come in at the, I guess, post to release stage. I guess generally at least a month out from the intended release is useful, where I can, either, again, sometimes give feedback on the cuts, not trying to change your story, but how to possibly structure it so that people are going to actually watch it. So looking at the opening shot, things like that, how to make it faster. I think for online viewers, pacing is really important, and you move at a faster pace.
It's like that moment when you're watching something on TV and you reach for your phone. If you're watching on your phone, you've got nothing else to reach for except the next clip.
Exactly. Like, I'll go on to the next video. Even things like credits for obviously a regular series, you would have the credits play at the end. For a lot of online series, I'd say you got to lose the credits. Still, you crediting people, but you're putting that either in the video description or you're going to have a dedicated video at the end that you release that has the credits on it, because YouTube can see no one stays for the credits, obviously. So then YouTube and other platforms are seeing that like people are watching the video, but they seem to keep dropping off in the last 2 minutes. Okay, people must not like it as much, right? So it's not going to get necessarily, maybe that could be harming you for getting recommendation because you're sticking to what is meant to happen for TV. And again, you can see that, I mean, when you watch TV stuff now, all of them do cut the credits, or, the voiceover comes over and starts letting you know what's coming next, because they, audience behavior is kind of the same across the board. We're all developing in that same way. Just kind of YouTube and online is ahead, but it's all the same.
If you had $500 and a phone and maybe a TikTok account, how would you go about testing whether or not a series even had an audience before you're getting started?
Honestly, I'd take the $500 to pay myself for taking a day off, and I would just be using the time, I guess, on the phone to find that audience. I think that is the number one thing that more creators and filmmakers need to do is, as we've been saying, actually identify the audience versus even making something, because you need to find out, is there actually a community out there, and how big are they, and what kind of stuff do they watch? That audience might be there, but maybe they're interested in the style of video that they like to watch is not similar to maybe what you like to create. So I wouldn't even necessarily make anything. I would just be using it to ensure there actually is the audience there.
So to that end, it's kind of like, correct me if I'm wrong here, so you're really talking about there looking up things that are like what you're hoping to make and seeing if people are watching that. Or, for example, I know that at one point, I thought this was a great piece of advice. Whatever the thing that you're interested in doing, use that word plus talk and see if there's a witch talk or a tarot talk or a, house cleaning talk, whatever it is. See how big that community is and what the content looks like.
Exactly. Yeah, you can definitely just add talk to the end of your audience and see if they're there. But yeah, because like it is sometimes hard to find. Like you need to spend the time searching, and for the most part, like letting the whatever platform you're on, like understand what kind of stuff you're interested in so that you can start surfacing it more to you. And then, taking note of either, okay, there's a lot of videos being made, but they don't get tons of views, or like there are some big creators that make stuff on this topic that are really popular, but just indicates to you, I think essentially, is it worth your time creating?
Yeah, what do you have to say that's not being said?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, it's a matter of just watching. And that's honestly not enough filmmakers do that spend enough time in those online spaces.
Yeah, and I suppose more concerned about the wanting to make it than actually wanting to serve it to an audience. And I think this is something that Nick talked about in a recent episode, the idea of actually even creating a burner account in the profile of who you imagine the audience to be and seeing what gets served to you. Is that a technique you've used before? Yeah,
I think it's really useful at starting with a brand new profile, because obviously depending on what platform you're going on, but you spent time on that platform, it's understood what you like to watch and has, developed its recommendation around that. But starting a brand new account, then you can see what other stuff is out there. And it's, when you start a brand new account, like I've done that before, and you're like, this stuff is so bad, right? Because you're like, it hasn't been curated to what I like. And it's giving you basically the most popular, but so broadest, run-of-the-mill type content. So I guess, for a lot of producers who maybe are like, let me check out TikTok, and they spend like 30 minutes on there. You're like, yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, you're not going to want to spend that time there. But that's why you can start searching and scrolling from the point of view of the audience or viewer that you're trying to get to see what stuff comes up. But I think, having a burner account is a good way to go about it, because if you're just using your own personal account, if you use it enough, then it's going to be very specific to what you like. And so, it's worth trying to think of seeing it from a different viewpoint.
For you yourself, as someone who obviously is deeply embedded in online and creates content as well, what are the things that stand out to you about creators you enjoy or admire and the way they interact with their audiences?
I love that. That's a good question. Passion. I think that's it. I think all creators that connect with an audience and succeed in the online space have genuine passion about the topic that they're creating around. There's some really great film reviewers that I love on TikTok, and you can tell how much they love movies. That's why they started making videos. Now they're big enough that they're, getting sent to cover premieres and interview cast, but, they just started doing it from their bedrooms because they just wanted to find other people who wanted to talk about movies. And that's kind of the case with any of the accounts that I like to watch, is that they are knowledgeable because they are such, a fangirl. That's kind of my background, as in that's how I came into the online space and was interested, because I was a fangirl of a bunch of different fandoms. And so I think that's what serves you well in the online spaces, that you have kind of this unending well of passion that you can tap into that helps you create and understand how other people behave.
I think that's amazing advice. And I often see with people who they want to make films more than they want to connect with an audience. So it's, they watch a lot of movies, not live a lot of life, and they don't get really obsessed with something that they really want to share. It's about getting to be a filmmaker at all costs because that identity is appealing versus the actual making. I was talking to someone the other day about Curry Barker and obsession. And it's like, if you said you'd like to be Curry Barker, well, you would need to do 10 years of making YouTube videos. And even then, there's no guarantee that you will then magically become Curry Barker. And he spent 10 years doing that because he wanted to do it. It wasn't so one day I'll get to direct a feature. It was because every day this excites me to make stuff and share it.
Exactly. That's what you need to try and keep alive within you.
Is there a time when there was something that you creatively really wanted to do this, but the data just didn't support that would be a good thing that would engage an audience?
I guess there's been a time where the data revealed something about the creative that no one on the team expected. So it's slightly a bit different. But for example, for Inner, that's a series about a mother-daughter relationship. That's the real heart of it. So when we approached the marketing of it, everyone was like, yes, this our main audience is going to be female, and from between these kind of ages, that's who we're going to target. But about halfway through, we started seeing in the data that actually it was like 50-50 of the gender split, which was really interesting for the team and like not what had been expected. And that I think is useful data for that team moving forwards, because actually it appealed to a much bigger audience than had been expected. And I think that kind of came down to the focus of the series, that it was about the mother-daughter relationship, but also the Filipino background to it. I think that really resonated across the board and meant that, they actually had a different audience than they had expected, which is always, that's kind of always interesting that have seen happen, where a team go in thinking, this is our audience, this is who is going to show up for it. And then actually through the release, you discover actually either it didn't speak to that audience and resonated with someone else, or this whole other different group found the series and really loved it. And then all of a sudden it gives you more opportunities basically to expand out your base. So that's always interesting when that happens, where I guess, your instincts or your expectations are for one thing, and then actually you're totally surprised by who ends up showing up.
Yeah. And who else like that resonates with for whatever reason. So I think there's something to be said there for that hyper specificity can actually end up touching on lots of spaces.
Yeah, that's a great way. Yeah. There's so many different possibilities of how you can tap into different groups.
The specific is the universal. Someone might not be from the Filipino community, but there's something in that mother-daughter relationship or even any parent relationship that they can somehow relate to.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's when I talk about niche, like that's why it works in the online space, because it then does become universal, but it helps you narrow down and that first tier, find it, and then hopefully gets big enough that it then gets pushed out to different groups that can still relate to the themes.
Yeah, it's almost like, a really relatable meme. You're likely to share it. It's interesting you said that. Just quickly, first tier. So what does that look like versus like second or third tier?
Yeah, actually, it's a good question, and is kind of how I approach things in terms of like, basically, that you have your primary audience that you're planning on that will watch it. But obviously there can be different components to the series that other groups might find interesting. So I think you kind of want to lean into your tier 1 primary audience when you're marketing it, so that like if it gets actually starts to get traction and people watch it, then the platforms can see like, oh, people are interested in this, people are watching it, why don't we try serving it out to other people? And then it's probably going to go out to those other groups that ideally you've identified. And sometimes it's not who you think. Unlike traditional TV that needs to be as broad as possible and like is designed to appeal to as many people from the get-go, that's kind of the opposite approach you need to take for online, that you need to make it really specific so that people actually find it. And then a lot of these platforms take note of stuff that gets traction, and then they'll start serving it out to other people. And that's how you can build actually a much broader and a more universal audience base through leaning into how specific and niche the topic is.
I think that's tremendous. And that's such a useful takeaway for people to realize that hyper specificity that gets a core hardcore audience will actually grow it, rather than it's got to be so broad and bland that it doesn't have anyone flick off it and then maybe it survives in the traditional sense. Thank you so much, Alyce. You've been so generous with your time and your thoughts. I'd love to ask you, as we do for all our guests, what's a big idea that you have for the future of the screen industry?
I'm going to take an idea I saw in a newsletter that I like to read, which is called Open Gardens. So credit to them. But I think my big idea would be that every film school should make their film students start a YouTube channel. I think that for film students of today, I mean, we can already see, obviously, a lot of the recent success of filmmakers have come from YouTube. You don't need to then stay in YouTube. But I think in terms of filmmakers' careers, like once you finish film school, a lot of filmmakers like, how do I go and make my feature film? That, as we all know, actually takes like minimum 10 years if you're lucky to get up. But probably most of the work that you're going to do to help you stay in the industry, traditionally would either be commercial, TV style stuff, ads. But now it is social media. It's working either for big YouTube creators or it's creating content that lives in online platforms. So having the ability as a filmmaker to understand how those platforms work through the practice of just making stuff and putting it out on there is going to better set you up post-graduation to get job, be employed. And then hopefully also understand how audiences work, which I think if you're, a filmmaker, you ideally want people to watch your stuff. You want people to show up. So those, I think, are all the benefits from going through that. You don't therefore need to become a giant YouTube creator or keep making stuff on the platform. But I think maybe more students need to have that experience of going through it so that they are then better set up for their future. So that's my big take. That's my big idea.
I think that's fantastic. And I think Lee Namo had said something similar in terms of before you can get funding, you should have built up flying hours online. But I think film students absolutely should take that into account. Alyce, thank you again so much for your time. This has been wonderful and a fantastic education for me as well. Listeners out there, please check out the show notes. There'll be links to Alyce's website, and I highly encourage you to hire her to work on your projects and get the benefit of all this wonderful insight. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we leave you?
Watch web series. Yeah, that's my last takeaway.
Thank you. That's terrific.
We Interrupt This Broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the
Gadigal people of the Eora Nation,
the Turrbal and Yagara people,
the Yugambeh language people,
and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions.
always was, always will be.